There you go.
Perfect. Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to the Kaleidoscope Deep Dive series. Today was a topic that was requested by a friend of mine who has just recently lost her father. He's been slowly declining over the last year or so, but now that he's gone, she's going through all these emotions and feelings that she wasn't aware of that happen in the body after a parent passes. So I wanted to go into explaining that because she said there was so much that I told her that she didn't know and made sense. So she has her mum still present, and I started with explaining um, that there are two different ways that your parents' energy flow through you. Now, if they're here still in a physical body, the energy comes through you when they're going through some issue, some issue that's within themselves, perhaps a genetic hand me down from their parents or grandparents. But if they're going through something that they're trying to resolve, and a question that hasn't got an answer, some pain from their past, it feels like it's like a floating bubble that comes through our energy field as they're working on it. Because we have this body is 50% mum's genetics, 50% father's. If we were 100% one of them, we would be a clone. So we're in a sense a half clone of our parents. But that bonding allows us to have a unique physical attribute and also a diverse gene pool to pull from to answer questions and unresolved issues. We have memories from our ancestors to help us resolve things along the way. That's that instinctive animal brain behaviors that is there automatically. But in an unresolved state, for example, I felt this bubble come up through my body a year ago, and immediately I understood that my father was going through bring a trauma had triggered him, and I felt it. And when it came up into my throat, my brain started to interpret. It had from the beginning, but it fully interpreted the energy, and my brain took it as a command. And my brain said, "This is how you behave." But my soul came through and went, "No, that's how my father has behaved." Because of his wound he carried for his father, and that's how his father behaved because of his wound he carried. So that hand me down unresolved issues because they didn't have enough experience or tools or conversation to resolve that issue, it got handed to me. And I'm like, no, no, I don't have that issue to resolve. And I could let that energy continue out of my body. So when a parent passes, after a period of time, your body will refer to the memories of the past parent after the grief has settled as your body as a library that's stored somewhere in your body that, let's say, that memory, that record is stored in your physical body, in the cells, in whatever organ that it resonates in. So when you're going through a grief of losing a parent, what's happening is you're slowly detaching from the physical version of them, that the bubble's alive within you, that now that connection is slowly dissolving. And so while we are aware of mental and emotional grief, that loss, and it's that loss of separation, and that occurs also to a similar degree from when women have children and the children is now at birth, the body has lost the child, even though the child is alive and well, the body has no longer has the same experience with it. So there is a changing of cells in that way. So this happens when a parent goes. So you go through a physical grief, this detangling of cells in the way that the body connects to the parent. So it's like the cells are like, well, where's the connection? So now the cells are going from a live connection to a connection that's now has to find another way. So as I was sort of explaining to her how to breathe through that and be aware that this physical grief that you're going to go through is random. It will hit at different times. Each time the cells renew in a different part of your body, that connection will bring up a physical response that will sometimes drop you to your knees, and you will whether your lungs are starting to process that new cells and you have to breathe through that, or it's your stomach who has to digest the idea that the connection has changed. So mentally and emotionally, especially when it's a shock departure, then you have that shock tear to deal with. But if you're mentally and emotionally aware over a long period of time that your parent's declining, you have time to prepare mentally and emotionally, but not physically. So this is sort of steps into understanding why does this happen and why does sometimes one parent more complicated than another because of our expression. So if you've been around kids long enough and aware and watching them, between sort of, they start, depending on the child, anywhere from 1 to 3, they start expressing behaviors of a parent. So they try it on for size. I'm going to behave a little bit like mum does because I've absorbed this environmental energy. And then they swing and they behave a little bit like dad. And they will do that up till they're in there about 8. And then the body is starting to identify which pathway they're going to pursue. It's an unconscious, perhaps even a soul conscious contract. So then from 8 till 24, there's this kind of like resistance of, hang on, I don't feel that's right, but you don't have that inner awareness of who you really are. And then once you hit the 24-year-old brain, from then on, you spend the rest of your life trying to figure out what happened in the first 8 years. But generally by then, subconsciously, you've chosen, are you going to be a 50-50, expressing the unresolved issues of both parents? So you swing between reacting like this and reacting like that. Or are you going to be in what I call like an 80-20, more like one parent? You can never get away from the other one, particularly 100%, but you can mostly. And once it becomes conscious, you can start to see the behaviors come up in your experiences and expressions and go, oh, I sounded like my mother, right? That was my dad's behavior. And we all at times recognize those things as you get older. But pre-24, you have to have a fairly conscious environment, the parents that teach children to be aware of that. So then what happens is through this journey of understanding, am I a 50-50 or am I a 80-20? You have that path of this chapter of remembering what you really, really are. And this came to me when I was working with a gene pool of horses that was hundreds of them I was working with all the time. And sometimes I would be dealing with 20 or 30, 40, sometimes up to 50 in a row of the same parent, the same father anyway, not necessarily the same mothers, but the father line, I would have a lot of them. So they were siblings, they were half siblings. And sometimes you would see the physical attributes, they would look something like their parent, or you would have these behaviors. And there was one particular lineage that was so expressive. Now, the father had this particular expression. Every one of his sons did the same. And it was the most amazing observation to see how closely that behavior was expressed. And we see it all the time. How many times do we see, a son copy the father's traits, or a daughter? So it happens with women as well, but you see it so much where the son will end up doing for work what the father did, because they've got all of these hand-me-down memories. So stepping into a role that they already have unconscious memories of, they go, oh, it's just easy to do. Well, of course it is. They have these unconscious tools that will make that job easy for them. It's like some singers and their children end up singing because they have cells with the same capacity. And as a parent expands that capacity, it is handed down to the child. Now, there are some cases where you get the opposite of that, where there is this light expression and you have sometimes a child that will follow the light, but then you'll have anomalies where something dark will come through with the most beautiful parents, and an expression from a child is opposing that. And the other way around, parents that really should have got a license to have children, they really haven't created a great world for their children, and that child is just a spark of light. So there's all these sort of what I like to call, in an affectionate way, an anomaly from the gene pool. Somehow there's a soul contract or a consciousness coming through. So there's all of these aspects to understand about yourself. You have a soul, but you are in a body that has a library and a storage system from all of your ancestors, God knows how far back. But generally, it's not too common that we go back 10 to 14 generations, because in that time, there was a lot of energy and a lot of light. And it's in between that time that there's this shadow or this darkness is coming. So we're usually resolving more commonly up to 5 to 10 generations of stuff in the now. So as we're kind of starting to be aware of who we are, who we're reflecting as a parent, when they pass, all of their unresolved issues flood through. So you get this emotional and mental distortions for a period of time because the connection's changing. You're changing to a spiritual connection, not a physically. While the cells are still within you, the cells of your father or parent that's passed is no longer active in that way. So the body then has this flood, and that's why, we talk about grief. We all know what grief is, but there's so many other layers to grief that we're exploring, and we have no choice. And that's where sometimes these unresolved issues that come to the surface to be handed upon you can, how often do we hear at funerals or just after, the siblings end up in a mess and there's war because they're all got these unresolved issues that are suddenly flooding to the surface. Now, if one sibling is an 80-20 of, let's say, the mother's expressions, and another sibling is 80-20 of the father's expressions, and the mother and the father environment never got to resolve their core reasons for them coming together and bonding to have children in the first place, then the siblings have been handed down that issue, and with it flooding through in that moment, that grief can mean you can be an absolute loggerheads because you're in the most opposing energy of the unresolved issues of your parents. So that flooding of energy comes out in a tsunami of grief. So I was able to say, with her sibling coming in to spend time with her for the funeral and all of that, to be aware of this flood of energy that's going to come through. And if you have a sibling that is not aware of themselves, then that energy will come through. What do? They will just reenact that memory because it will tell the brain is an organ that takes command and order. It will respond to that and then just act and behave. Now that leads into a whole other conversation, which we can do another time, but how the brain follows commands. So many times we'll see, and we all comment on like, oh, the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree. They're behaving like a particular parent. And we know our siblings and also within ourselves how we behave like the mother or the father at different times. But this flood through grief can bring a lot of trauma and great issues up to the surface through that time. So it's such an incredible time to start just taking a pause and allow the grief. So I stepped her through when that grief, those waves of tsunami grief, and your physical body is feeling that separation, your mind at that moment can't figure out what exactly is going on. It's just, that's the physical grief part. That's the separation. The cells getting used to the information now having to be accessed, like you've got to go find it in your akashics, in your body. And that's that physical grief that just needs a moment of expression, allowing the wave of energy to move and shift, which is that emotional energy. And then when that shifts, you can just let it pass. And how often do you have that burst of emotion in that grief? And then once it passes, you're like, I'm good now. I can go back to what I was doing. But then your body's very tired because of that physical expression, but also because your cells have changed. So grief fatigue has a whole other level because your cells are changing significantly quickly. So all of this information gets mashed in, and there is very rarely can we step aside from that grief, because when the brain is fully engaged in a reenactment, or feeling the expression, it's so hard to separate yourself from that moment. And it reminds me of, I think women have this feeling every month. How often do you, when you were cycling, in your menstruation cycle, you would be at a point, you're like, I don't know what's wrong. I just feel some emotion coming through. And for a moment, you forget, oh, I'm either ovulating or I'm in this particular part of the cycle. And each month, there's this slight amnesia that we go through, and you forget that moment. Once you remember, oh, yes, it's this part of, then you settle with it and you process it. But losing a parent has a little bit of that sort of amnesia effect, and the brain is flooded with the way that you heal. There's two ways we heal genetic unresolved issues, especially if they're absorbed by the body between conception and 8 years old. You don't remember a lot of them. Some, if they're big enough events, you will, but the rest you don't. And absorbing the environment, you don't generally remember, because you don't have someone telling you that's right or wrong. It just is what it is. So when that expression comes through, to identify it in the time takes practice. So this is where sitting in that energy, and when the brain says, say this, do this, be this, and with one of the or the other of the expressions, which is reenact, behave the way this energy is telling you to behave, or you attract somebody that will behave that way towards you. So that's the two ways. You either become it yourself, or you attract that energy from somebody else that becomes the reflection for you to remember that there is an unresolved issue here needing awareness. And all you have to do to resolve those issues is be aware, sit in that space, and identify, oh, there's an emotion coming through. My mind is saying, say this, do this. And there's a soul part of me that doesn't quite, either feels the urge to do it, or doesn't feel quite aligned to it, but you find yourself behaving or saying or doing something, and afterwards you go, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Because the soul now has time to reflect on the command that the brain has asked you to follow through with. So that's a kind of like a basic outline of how this energy from our parents can be transferred. But in this moment, I would love if Gina, if you would like to come through and perhaps tune into the energy yourself and reflect on that, and maybe we can work through just a little bit of a clearing of, in a sense, just the idea of that grief energy that we have unresolved in our body, and maybe even clearing the process to identify the genetic issues that we need to see and feel.
Yeah. Okay. Let's take some deep breaths first, okay? That's a lot of information that we just heard to kind of digest. So I'm going to play a little bit of music, and then we can kind of just take some breaths and come into the moment. And tell me if you can hear the music. You hear it? Okay. All right. So let's close our eyes for a minute. And we're just going to center into our body. And we're going to take a few deep breaths. And we're going to start with breaths to the count of 4. And we're going to hold it to the count of 7. And then release to the count of 8. So let's go ahead and breathe with me. Deep breath in to 4. Hold to 7. 5, 6, 7. Release to 8. Start with another deep breath in. Count of 4. Hold to 7. to 8. 6, 7, 8. One last one. And then release to 8. And as you keep your eyes closed, just continue to breathe. Feel the rise and fall of your breath as it washes through your body. And as you continue to breathe, let's focus a little bit on the moment of our parents, those different sides that inhabit our body, from our father, from our mother. Those parts of us that maybe we've even abandoned or wanted to deny. And we can forgive those parts of us that we have judged in them, and realize that they're part of us as well. Continue to just breathe and process and search your mind for all the ways that we inhabit parts of our parents, and possibly we are part of the ancestral healing for them. And ascend that when we heal ourselves, we heal 7 generations forward and 7 generations back. There are some of us here that have decided to take this on for our families, for the planet, and to do healing in the collective. And the first place to start is within ourselves, and these parts of ourselves that are our parents, and possibly even our children. And often we live vicariously through our children as well. And we can recognize those parts of us in them. Remember that our healing will heal others as well. As we continue to breathe, I want you to visualize over your head golden purple light. And that golden purple light is going to wash in through your crown, over your body, and through every cell of your body. Every cell will be illuminated with this golden purple light, and it'll be healing and energizing and reprogramming any of the parts that need that attention. To feel it drape over our shoulders, down our arms, almost like honey, pouring all the way down our body, down our legs, through our knees, our calves, our feet, and grounding into the earth. The Earth Mother will receive these from us, as the mother is the receptor, the female is the receiving part. And beyond the parents of our worldly bodies, our mother, father, source, God, planet, as we see these parents in everything, nature, it is the duality of the unity of oneness. And it's about integrating the masculine, the feminine, the father, the mother in our own body. Continue to breathe. I'm just going to take a few moments to be quiet and feel what comes up into your own body that we want to discuss together. Now, as you come back into your awareness, We'll gently shake out anything from our hands and our feet. Feel through our shoulders and then open your eyes when you're ready.
Thank you, Gina. That was just beautiful.
Welcome. Thank you all.
And, to start that space was quite a lovely image of stepping into that beautiful gold purple light where both my mum and dad were there. My mum has passed, but my dad has not. And just allowing that energy of their souls to be present with me. And I hadn't actually had any time in my mind to actually be in the same space where my mother and father was. They haven't done that for a very long time. And that was a nice feeling to kind of stand between them, kind of like, and feel I had my father on my left side, my mother on my right, and we had our arms around each other. And I'm like, wow, that never happened. But it was really nice to go to a moment where to let go of the judgment of myself and of them from the past and just allow that they are the two sides of me and let that just be. Well, that was lovely. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to share? Grace or Eva, would you like to share what has come up for you in this talk? Oh, let me see if I can unmute you.
There, I did it. Sorry, I'm quite tired. I just came back from a family funeral, so that's interfering with both my parents have passed, my mother last year and my father almost 10 years ago. I think I'll have to do that again, but right now what's fresh is my uncle passed suddenly, and there's only one remaining sibling. And I, as you were speaking, I was kind of wondering how it works between siblings as well. That came up for me, but also just the general family line. It's just so obvious at a heightened moment like that when there's a funeral involved. So
Yeah, thank you. And you would have seen that intensity, and that's what happens when. So that for their side, the ones that are the children of your uncle, and well, even any remaining
sorry, he didn't have any children.
so siblings of his.
Sorry, yeah. So I have one remaining aunt,
Yeah.
and her intensity.
Yes.
Yeah.
That she would have been the last one left with all of both sides. And it's interesting when I see that when people still have parents and they're 50-50, I usually, when I am dealing with a family dynamics and someone is having the most trouble out of all of the siblings, I usually, when I connect, I'm like, I bet they're a 50-50. Because when you're really intensely resolving one parent, then you get to have more time in their good parts, their bad parts, and work through that. Now, if you're a 50-50, you bounce in, you bounce out, you go over here, you bounce in, you bounce out, and you don't have enough energetic time to fully absorb the attraction and the reenactment because you're bouncing to the other parent going, well, who do I behave like in this situation? And I saw that genetically with animals a long time ago. In a stressed situation, I would watch them go, do I behave like this parent or that parent? There was a moment of confusion before action of who to be. So in those moments, the siblings that are, especially if they've expressed, we all get a flooding of the 50-50 feeling. We don't quite know which energy to experience. But if it is one parent, then you get that flood from that one parent. But if you're a sibling and one of your siblings has passed and you're the only one left, then you get all of that flood of both sides. And now it's up to you to work through consciously, like, no, I'm not working through. That's not something I'm here to do. And you can let it go. But it's a conversation that you need to have with your soul to your brain. So yes, all of that intensity for her, your aunt, would be all on her shoulders now. And if they're sort of in their 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, to comprehend that complexity, to work through that, very few of them have any tools or even any awareness. So they are just
Yep.
fully in brain command mode, and they will just act out however their pain is reflecting the unresolved issues. And they don't have much choice. So to step in and help them in those moments is almost impossible. So you have to just kind of like almost be and allow that they're going to react and behave potentially in their worst manner. And that's what grief does when you don't understand what's coming up, or at least, and not all of us, in the moment of energy passing through, we're not going to understand an unresolved issue. But what we can do is just sit in it and going, wow, look at this energy coming through. Look how my brain is wanting to interpret it and behave a certain way and feel a certain way, or judge or speak or whatever it is you want to do, or back away and retreat. Observing that and kind of just sit with it and kind of like, I'm just looking, letting that energy come up, and how my brain wants to be with it, how my heart wants to be with it, how my gut wants to be with it, and let it through. But it's hard enough to work through with people that have some understanding, let alone some that don't. So that would be for her very intense. And we all, I think at funerals there is some empathy in that moment, that there's an inner knowledge that grief is messy and it is mixed up, and we do tend to have, most of us, a part where we have compassion in that moment, until that energy comes through and triggers something unresolved within us. And then we go through that place of like, oh, I can't stay in my posture anymore, and of empathy and allowing. We're now engaged in the energy, and then we have to play out whatever comes up. And that's why funerals can be so messy. And how often do family gatherings of any sort bring up these issues, because the energy is going to re-emerge. And so I wish your aunt really well, and yes, you would have seen and felt so many family triggers being there, and not all of them are bad. Sometimes it's magic, but sometimes it's the unresolved issues that hit us. And we don't ever stop to kind of like negotiate the good bits. We just accept them and feel it as relief. We don't stop and go, all right, that was an excellent way, I really like that. But I was aware many years ago that I'm an 80/20 of my mother, and there were certain parts of her I did not like. And so I did a lot of work to consciously say, no, I don't want that expression. But there were parts of my mum that I loved. And I hadn't seen her, my dad's cousin, um, for a very long time. She knew my mum because she was close to her. And she was like, oh my God, you are so much like your mother, because we hadn't really talked for 20 years. And in that moment, I was like, yeah, I'm okay with that expression, because physically I look a lot like her in some aspects. But there was a certain soft behavior of my mother that was a very gentle expression that I was like, I'm okay with that. Um, if somebody had perhaps said it at a different time, and if I was in that poor me category of that expression, I might not have liked it. I wouldn't have, might not have taken it as a compliment. But this is where it's such a lovely time for a moment. And thank you, Gina. That was such a beautiful moment to sit and kind of like, and just feel the energy of our parents, and just be with it and be okay with it. And that it is what it is, and it's how we're here. We have to come here in this space somehow. And this is the way that consciousness created us to have this experience. And it's all about remembering. All of these unresolved issues come up, and to have those two aspects of healing, of reenactment and attract the energy, so that we can face these issues, is about remembering who we are as a soul in this body, that we can actually kind of identify the things that put us together, and allow the soul to come in and make the better choices, and take over the command of this body and start saying, no brain, we're going to do this. No heart, this is an expression we're going to feel, and allow the body to navigate from a higher command rather than the brain, because it is a command based organ. And it's such a lovely place to kind of spend some time and just sit, but it can be confusing and hard. Are there any other thoughts you'd like to share or questions?
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't, it's so fresh. I don't really want to make this chat about me, but basically, I felt very attacked. She was very, very aggressive in her expression, and it was so difficult. Um, like I had the compassion piece, but I was also being attacked in like because I felt it that way. So to have to just bite my tongue, and I was very happy to fly home today. So
Yeah, and
um,
that reenactment, isn't it? So she's, for some reason, your energy, the mix of genetics and awareness, and sometimes what happens in that moment, if you have actually resolved some of those hand-me-down issues, which I know you have, I can feel it, but I also know you have, then to have someone in that space where all of that hand-me-down is now dumped on her, to be in your space and you have answered these questions for yourself, that can trigger somebody into this um, abnormal bad behavior, because there's this feeling of whatever it is for them, whether it's that they basically see a feeling this lack. You've resolved something that is now flooding them and they've got no clue. And that can
yeah,
really push
sure.
people away on so many different levels in society. But you have already passed that. You've already identified so much of who you are and stepping into that. When you step back into the gene pool that haven't answered those questions in relevance to themselves, it can
Mhm.
be messy. And then you can walk in and be a target because you have answers. And then it brings up their unanswered questions right to the surface. And that's where the attraction.
Oh yeah, it was quite extraordinary, just like you say, and she didn't want to hear anything from me. It was just blocked. So, but on the other side, I did want to reflect because my mother just died last year. That but also because of what I personally have gone through over the last few years that I've discussed with you. Um, I feel like I was 80/20 for my dad for most of my life, but then the big bang that happened in my life opened up this other side, and now I'm exploring a little bit more of the mother side. So it's interesting how I almost feel like I want to be 50/50.
Yes,
Like
that
I'm choosing that.
wow, what that is so awesome that you're aware of that and stepping into that space to explore that, because you've spent so much time in that place and you've found your resolve with your father, and you can let the rest go. There are pieces in there that we don't have to resolve. That belong to our father. And once we identify, oh, I don't actually have to go there. And I don't have to say yes to these other fractal, other people and beings that will come in to reflect that person. We can actually go, I can say no. I'm done with that, attracting that expression. I'm no longer reacting that, reenacting it. I'm not behaving that. So I'm not going to attract it either. I've healed that part. And when it comes in to kind of go, you sure about that? And you go, yeah, I am. But to the fact that you're aware now that you're opening up this other part to then explore that part of yourself is such an amazing thing to hear. And it's an amazing journey, not always easy and not always fun. But I say to everybody, this is the work. This is a big part of coming here, is letting this soul come back in and remind us. This is a remembering that the lineage is just a part of it. This is just a way to be expressing the soul. We have to have a form, a structure, well, a form of some sort, a body of some sort, an expression. And that's an amazing journey. And with all of those triggers from your aunt, that's the time where we kind of like need to just kind of breathe for a minute and let all of that strong energy, because when you're around somebody that then targets, kind of like, all right, you're going to wear all of my pain because you seem to have sorted stuff out. So let me just dump all of mine on you. doesn't work temporarily, what you feel is this flood of their pain, and you're like, oh, and you can slowly dissipate that energy. But there are people that would take on that pain and then judge it and then have a conflict. How many people do we say, oh, I just don't speak to that sibling, or that those people haven't spoken for 30 years? It's too much, and it can be. So it's allowing that moment of all of her energy she's seen in you. You've resolved some issues here. Well, then if you've got the answers, I'm going to dump this on you because I don't. And then they feel resentful towards you, or some pain towards you, because you have a capacity to deal with it. But this is where gently you can just go, I love you and I respect the fact that you're grieving, but no, that's not mine to resolve. And then let that sort of wave out of you. But afterwards, then there'll come some really gold little bee pieces, that because you've bonded with her grief and all of that gene pool, then as you part, there'll be some gold, but you've got to allow the dark cloud to leave first, and then you'll start to go, wow, I saw this, and see the magic that's within yourself, that you have such capacity to um, reflect and absorb and heal from that. And it's very powerful. And I think all of our deep core issues come from this place. If we all become more aware of the genetic body and how we can just go, oh, there's a soul that can come in and choose some expression here, then we could get on with remembering how to be creative in all of the aspects that we're here for. And we have those moments where we feel so empowered to now step into our purpose, our what drives us, our creativeness. And then we get mixed up in the pool of being a genetic being for the rest of it. But Grace, I'd love to hear if there's any comments you have or any reflections.
Yeah, definitely been super interested in everything that you all have shared so far. And thank you so much, Gina, for the meditation. I too got a nice visual of my parents coming together through me, which just is a nice reminder. I think sometime, well, my father passed 2 years ago, so I think that's where I go, or I think about the where my mom's at in her healing journey, but I haven't put them together in a moment. So it was nice to get to experience that like union of energy through me. But yeah, I definitely resonate with, I pretty immediately began experiencing a flood of my dad's unresolved issues and identified it as that because for the first time I was having lots of thoughts and experiences with depression and just darker ideation that like had not existed in my psyche before. And I think it was kind of twofold. My father struggled with those things, and I did see him resolve some issues of his own before he died. He did die suddenly, but in a much happier place than he had been for the past decade. So that was like a piece of relief, but I think I was aware pretty again once I became aware because it took a few months there where I don't really remember life very much. And I'd already began shifting some of the patterns that I learned from my dad. I had some spiritual awakenings that already initiated some shifting away from those behaviors that I really learned from him. But with the pressure of his like sort of immediate transcendence, definitely feel like a lot of weight came with that. And I see how each of my siblings are different, resolving those things within them differently now, especially when you talk about the percentage of like which parent do you identify most with? My sister is struggling the most, and I think she's real 50-50. And my brother is doing, like, I would say the best, and I think he identifies actually more with my mom. And I understood my dad so much. I feel very fortunate to feel so connected to him, and like have very direct experiences where like I just feel him and his presence and feel that. I think what has come up for me in the loss is, having to deal with some of these heavier depressions and like again, what is grief versus what is, yeah, these unresolved issues? What should I allow for in just normal waves of grief, what is indulging in the sort of darkness. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like that's where I've struggled to accept grief, accept the parts of my father that reside within me that I have to either face, embrace, or decide, what to do with. And I'm feeling like in a more of a down space because I was with my sister all weekend and we had a great time. But like when we're together, it's like those, it just, it just evokes a lot of that grief and those genetic aspects that we share in the struggle with. And so yeah, so it's a very well timed topic for me. And so I thank you for sharing your reflections. It's definitely helping me feel more understanding for my physical self and my human self. Um, yeah.
Wow, that was really beautiful. And you both are bringing up some beautiful topics about that strong energy that like Eva, you felt on you, and Grace, you're feeling kind of within you. And in that kind of merging, when you're connecting to your gene pool, there's a very strong, the skin just permeates that. It's like you can meet a stranger that behaves really badly, and you're like, I'm not taking that energy on, and you don't. But when it's your own gene pool, as soon as you're with them, you just engage in the bubble because you share the genes. So it's an easy enmeshment. So there's a time where, when you've been around a relative or a sibling or whatever that's going on, it just takes a little bit of kind of like being aware to kind of, it's okay to separate and be myself again. And in those moments, you're going to feel the shared pain. And sometimes it's very obvious when it's not yours, like when somebody attacks you, but sometimes it's when it feels like it's coming from within with this, it's a now we bubble, not a me bubble, that it feels like it's yours. It feels like your brain will say, well, I have to own it. It's from within me. And this is where you can go, well, do I want to own it? Do I want to sit in this space and this stress? And we all have some energy we're working with. And this is all, again, everything that comes up is about remembering. So just sit with that energy and kind of like and ask it, do I really want to explore that for myself? Is there any aspect of that that I need to resolve, or can I find a way to say, no, thank you? And not have to judge it, not have to have any more detail than no, thank you. It can just go off. And it's exploring how do we cope with that? Can we let it go? Is holding on to some energy, um, then holding on to them? It's all of those things, and none of it's bad, and there's no wrongs or rights. It's just a choice on how you want to work with that energy in that time. So it's really just sitting with it, and whatever comes up at any point, and just kind of like, okay, having that quiet conversation with self of, I can see that. And maybe not even have to get an answer. Just like maybe this is a question that is just passing through your field right now. You don't have to answer. If you've never identified with that before and it's just coming up from an unresolved issue that's ancestral, and when they come through, you're like, well, yeah, I see it, but I don't actually feel I have to answer this one. I'm just observing it. And now I'm going to go, well, I'll just let it go to source. I don't have anything to contribute to that space other than being aware that it's present and giving yourself permission to not have to figure it out, because maybe it's not yours to do that with. It's just yours to acknowledge. And I see that it was within you, and maybe the depth of what you're going through, because this is coming straight from source now, and perhaps him, is to understand the depths of despair that he held. And when you're holding this energy, it's a residual energy to show you in your own space, oh my goodness, look how heavy he held this space for such a long time. And that awareness sometimes is like, oh my goodness, that parent or that person, that friend or whatever that I cared for held an energy that must have exhausted them. And sometimes that awareness, then it just shifts. So then there's a message in it for you to see something, and it might not be having anything to do with you resolving it. It's just going, oh, that makes me understand those behaviors in that time, or the choices they've made in their life because of this overwhelming energy that they could not figure out. So let that pass and see if that shifts for you in those moments. It's kind of like, yes, I can see that that was heavy. I don't want to carry that. And thank you for the awareness. I right now deeply, truly understand for holding it for this period of time, that it was very big for them. And so many of their choices would have been made in that place. I hope you see.
Yeah, I appreciate that reflection. I definitely I've gained a lot of compassion from being able to see this side of living and how heavy it is. So I appreciate the permission to just not resolve it, but just to be in just awareness of and accepting that, yeah, that builds compassion when we can have a personal experience with an energy. We have more compassion for people living, with it. And I think that my dad held a very heavy head, and there were lots of things that, you know, came out later to understand how hard it was to be him at different moments. So I appreciate that perspective as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Grace. Eva, is there anything else you'd like to share or say?
Sorry, my phone is slow to react. I guess it's what's lingering for me is to really know if the trigger is something that I need to resolve, or if it really is just, somebody else's energy, which would feel triggering no matter what, even if it wasn't my own issue. So I'm finding that line a little bit tricky to figure out what's mine. Because so many people have said, well, if you're triggered by anything, then obviously it's in you too, right? Which I feel is an excessive statement. I feel like there is a place where one is a victim of something else. Um, and for sure, there are places where we have to take responsibility and figure out what it is that's triggered in us. Um, but I think when we're in our human uh, form, we are like everybody says, we are just human. So we do take on these feelings, right? That make us feel a certain way for a certain reason, right? It's to keep us safe, or to warn us of something. So anyway, just I'm still fiddling with that, and because it's just so recent and I didn't sleep super well, you don't know whether you're just being sensitive at times or whether it's really something that is that you need to work on.
I love that reflection, that question. And something and as you were talking, there was a guide coming through reminding me of something to share, that in these moments when you say get attacked, what happens is what they're actually needing is their cup is empty, and they're desperately needing for it to be filled. And so in that attack, what happens is there's a transference of energy. When you bond with them, they bond with you, and they can take some of your energy because they're feeling less life force, they're feeling whatever it is they're in depletion or lack of. And there's an automatic sharing when we have this bonding. And we don't even realize that when it's a gene pool, it happens automatically. So energy is shared. So she would have walked away feeling justified and perhaps a little better within herself, because she's given you some of that, and you've given her, through giving that compassion, that love, she was showing you that she was so void of self-love in that moment, that to give you that energy and take your compassion that you had on offer, there was like, well, you can cope with this. I'm going to give you, and I'm taking as much of your compassion energy. So now then you walk away, what are you left with? The energy of depletion and lacking in your own personal energy that you offered in the exchange. And the beauty of that is that you have the capacity to do that. The hard part is now you have to dissolve their energy, and it actually can hurt. So at the moment, I'm feeling that most of the hurt is actually her hurt in your body. That's the transferred energy. Because when I've done surrogate healings for someone in the past, and some fairly big ones, I have had to heal from their pain that I've allowed to come into my body. And when it's been a serious illness or something in the body, and they have no, their cup is completely empty, I then have to go and fill my cup up because I gave my cup to them. So I think in this transition, you are definitely depleted, and give it a couple of weeks. When you get your natural energy back up, you will know what part, if any, was yours, or in the exchange, you just gave so much of yourself and you're tired and depleted. So it feels like yours because the energy that's in your cup is her grief. So give that time to just not even don't give yourself permission to not even have to resolve that just yet. Fill your cup back up, love yourself again, realize that you've done something so incredibly beautiful. You gave all of your heart, compassionate energy to a woman that was completely depleted. It just means that in return, you get hers. And it's not comfortable when we get handed that energy. We're like, oh, hang on a minute. I'm not sure I signed up for that. But even when we are conscious of doing that, it still hurts. So let that pass and just do all the things you know to do to fill your cup up. And I think that food and your own space and what you normally do, because you're an incredible into it yourself, you'll fill your cup back up. But I having been through a funeral of an aunt recently, I got attacked at the funeral because I realized I had the capacity to hold that pain for those that couldn't, but I still had a portion, and I said, no, you can't have all of my cup. But the part that I allowed in that exchange, I still had to let that hurt filter through my own physical body, and it felt like little knives, and I had to just filter that out. And once that did, I was like, oh, I'm good again. It's not, that actually wasn't mine, but it hurt in the process. So I hope that
Okay.
helps. And
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that because it really is like that. That's how it feels. Like I was just sitting there going like, that's not mine, but it still came in anyway. You know? So
it's that exchange, and you need to identify how beautiful you are, and that you are willing to offer compassion, and then in that exchange, you're gonna like, oh, this is gonna hurt, and you have to now heal the pain that's in your body that you exchanged.
okay. Okay. So part of it is her pain and grief, but it's also part of what came from her parents still, right? And whatever was left from her brother that came into her. So it's sort of, yeah.
Yeah. So you're intoxicated at the moment with all of that unresolved stuff, and that would hurt in so many different ways. And you would the reflection, and I think the triggers right now is just that it would be familiar. And you're like, I don't want to go there again. I'm done. And some of your brain were going like, I'm done with that. It's just that it's in your body because you shared it, and she's given you that as a gift because you offered the exchange. And when we're more conscious of it, we can go back into our family environment going, what percentage of exchange am I prepared to negotiate with here? And sometimes you go in and going, I am not exchanging energies. I will go for the space, but I am not. And when you can step into that space, it's amazing. But there are other times where you go, no, I'm going to take a hit for this because I know that I can cope with that and that person's really struggling. So thank you for taking that hit for your aunt, and please know that you are an incredible intuit, and you have the capacity to heal somebody else's pain in that sharing. and you'll know exactly what to do with it. Give it a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Gina, is there anything you'd like to share or say before we close the session off?
Yeah, I was just reflecting a little bit of what came through me as I was going through that and visualizing my parents coming together, but also having this deep amount of compassion and empathy. And I would say more so with my mother. And I would, we've been doing work on both of my parents, and my mother is the one with the most, let's just say, troublesome, lack and scarcity and other darker things that seem to kind of come into my awareness. So to just have empathy and forgiveness for her and the parts of me that I've gotten from her, and to um, not shame or blame, but forgive those parts within me, and also realize that a lot of my creativity I feel like I get from her. So there are a lot of beautiful things in her as well. But I think the biggest thing was the forgiveness and the empathy for, let's just say, the cross she's had to bear. And and also appreciating myself for doing the work on both of my parents within me. So yeah.
That's magic. And thank you for all of your reflections and sharing this space with Gina and I as we navigate these conversations as they come up. So I'd just like to end it and by saying just a deep thank you and love to both of you and all of you for sharing the space and your thoughts and experiences, because they really, in this shared moment together, we enhance each other, and I love you all very much. Thank you so much. You take care, and see you again.
Thank you. Love you all. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you. Love you all. Bye.
Bye.